Hi, Dr. Pelto here. I'm going to go over today some of the do's and don'ts of how to keep your feet healthy when you're doing exercises. Frequently, we have patients that come into the office that develop foot issues, and I want to help you avoid some of them. So we're going to talk about two different aspects. We're going to talk about working out in your home, some of the do's and don'ts for that, and then also for the typical people that exercise, which are runners and walkers and such things like that. The first thing that you shouldn't do is exercise or do a lot of jumping barefoot. I find many patients that aren't prepared for barefoot walking or even something called an anatomic shoe, which is a minimalist shoe that doesn't offer any support. And then they do these exercise programs at home where they're jumping up and down on the hard surface barefoot. This can cause problems if you're not used to it. If you do have exercises that are barefoot that you're used to doing, you can keep doing them. But many of my patients that they jump up and down, they can develop stress fractures or something called bone marrow edema, which is basically swelling inside of the bone from that repetitive action. So the first thing would be if you are doing some type of exercises or something called plyometrics, where you're kind of jumping back and forth on your foot, you want to avoid doing that when you're barefoot. Okay. Another thing you should be careful of if you have any arthritis in your joints and you're doing lunges where you're kind of leaning forward and kind of doing lunges back and forth, you have to be careful because those can put added stress to those areas that have arthritis in them. The second thing that you shouldn't do is doing exercises when you are wearing flip flops. You don't know the amount of patients that I have that do exercises when they're wearing flip flops or when they're wearing just slippers, and they think that they're wearing something that is supportive for their feet. You really have to make sure that when you're working out, you should wear the shoe that is appropriate for that activity. I'm not saying you have to buy tons of shoes. Most of my patients, I recommend a running shoe. Even if they're not a runner, I find that running shoes can be better for you because they offer you more stability and they work well for that type of excess activity. Now, a lot of our patients they also have issues where they do a minimalist shoe, which would be like a shoe that has no heel on it, like a zero drop, and then they also have something that's wider in the toe box. That's something else that I recommend. And at the end, I'm going to show you how you can get our shoe buying guide that offers some more guidance towards getting your shoes. The other thing that you should do if you are working out, don't ignore foot pain. If you develop foot pain, like let's say you're normally used to running, you're used to walking, you're used to working out at home, and then all of a sudden you get foot pain that doesn't go away, you should get that evaluated. The most common thing that I see with runners, with walkers, with those that are working out are stress fractures. And this can not just be the problem in the bone, because usually the bone heals fast. The challenge is it's going to alter the way that you're walking and you're being active. And this can cause other problems like in your hip or in your knee or in other parts of your body. So if you are developing foot pain, if you are limping around, you should see one. If you don't get better in a week or so, you should see someone because it's going to help you get better faster to get back to your activity. Now I'm going to go over some of the things that you should do if you're working out to keep your feet healthy. The number one thing that I find my patients don't do, because everyone's busy and I think I'm kind of the same, is they don't prepare for working out. There's a couple of different ways of preparing. What's very popular now is something called an active release or active workout, such as kind of doing a light jog, doing a light run, doing kind of active movements with your body. You could do some stretches. I really like it for my patients. Most of the conditions that we see have problems in the back of the calf. So I'm a big advocate for foam rolling for the back of the calf. If you are going to do foam rolling, you start at the back of the calf, then you can go up to your quads, then your IT band, then your glutes. And there are different areas that you can foam roll. This really helps everything be released to cause less damage and less injury when you're working out. So I am a big advocate. How long? 2 to 3 minutes. Everyone's busy. You want to get out there, but do a couple of minutes of warm up. It's a good idea. Where it's more important to do foam rolling is actually after the activity. After the activity, after you shower, then you kind of rest and relax, and then you do the foam rolling because that's going to get out much of that lactic acid that's built up in the muscles and helps things to loosen up. Another thing that you should be doing is you should replace your shoes after a certain period of time. There's a couple ways of doing this. Some people think it's every 6 months. Some people think it's every year. It really depends on the amount of activity and the amount of miles that you are doing on that activity. I'm a big advocate of getting an extra pair of shoes so that when you're working out, you can wear the old pair and you can try the new pair. And if the new pair feels a lot better, it's time. Okay, that's the easiest thing is getting a second pair of shoes. When you buy one pair, just get two pairs. And that's also a good idea because many times these shoes, they change the type. And if you find one that you like, it's going to be hard to find that shoe later on. Another thing that you can do is you can put the date in either in the box or actually on the side of the shoe. You can just write that in, and so you know the time that you did it and changing it. Every 6 months to a year is a good idea for changing your shoes. Even if you rotate the shoes, I think it's good to change them. Another key, just be careful. Many of our patients, when they rotate their shoes from working out, they do all the really hard work in their house with those really bad, worn out shoes. That's another cause for foot pain. So just be aware, if your shoes get worn out, you should probably change those out to get something comparable. And the last thing I would recommend, if you are working out, you should find a shoe that is appropriate for your foot, specifically the shoe size. And I spend every day, at least 2 or 3 times, talking to my patients about shoe size, and many of the nail issues that people get, thickening of the nails, foot problems, callousing, can be helped with proper shoes and proper orthotics for those shoes. How do you tell if you have the right size shoe? I'm going to put a little link underneath here. There's one of our books. It's called the Shoe Buying Guide. It helps. We give this out. You just put your name and email. We'll give you that book. It'll explain how to do it. There's something called a sock liner test. Basically, you take the sock liner out of the shoe and you stand on it, and you should have a finger's breadth at the front of the longest shoe, the longest toe. That's the best way to determine if you have the right size shoe. And then in terms of what do I want? Do I want an anti-pronation? Do I want a neutral? Do I want a high arched shoe? It depends on your foot type. And I always recommend a couple of good shoe stores. If you're around our offices, we recommend PR Running and Sneakerama, some of the best places that you can get shoes. Actually, as well, Marathon Sports. You can get shoes there, and they'll watch you walk. They're going to make sure that you're in the appropriate shoe for you. But if you want our shoe buying guide, I'll put a little link underneath this video. So that concludes our tips, the do's and don'ts to stay healthy and pain-free when you're doing exercises.